I don't care how long it's going to take, as long as I am not going out on a stretcher or I don't get cut off by the time cutoffs or anything like that. Being a man of your word and doing everything that you say you're going to do is a badass characteristic. It's a trait, and that's how people are going to judge you the rest of your life. Is he a person who does what he says he's going to do? I also want to do it on my own terms. I don't want to do it because that's what people want me to do or that's what I'm supposed to do. I want to do it because that's what I want to fucking do, and I'm like hungry for it. You're going to get there. It's just going to take a little bit longer than you thought it was going to take.
How do you respond to adversity? How do you get to know yourself in the moments where things aren't going your way? Despite a track record of proving yourself to yourself, objectively reaching these metrics and believing that you're someone who could handle anything, what do you do when things aren't going so smooth? Today, you're going to meet somebody who responds to adversity with character, with poise, with grace. Someone who isn't shy about his failure and, in fact, is quite open about it despite all of his success. I'm very humbled to introduce to you today Mr. Chase Price, the founder of Casually Ambitious. How are you today, sir?
I'm well, brother. Stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. I think an optimal place to start would be your most recent misfortune, situation. How would you describe it?
A blessing. A blessing in hindsight, man. Never at the time, right? At the time, it's a big old slap in the face, slap upside the head. But in hindsight and learning from it, it's a blessing in disguise. I'll kind of set the scene a little bit. So I'm an ultra runner, ran a couple 400s in the last 2 years or so. So I like to do 2 a year. And then I ran Leadville 100. So 2 months ago, took on level 100 and ended up coming down with rhabdo about mile 60. Had to pull out of that race. First race I've ever had to DNF at. And it was brutal. It was brutal because I had so many buddies that were also running the race. So I'm laid up in the hospital for 2 days after the race having a DNF. And I'm seeing everybody post about getting their belt buckle and finish. And it hurts, man. But, I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't going to bask in it. I gave myself 2 days to get laid up in the hospital and, throw myself a pity party. But then it was like, okay, what's the lesson here? What can we take from this? What can we learn from this? And how can I make sure that, one, that I never experience anything like this again, but two, like my athletes and the people that I work with never come close to experiencing anything like this. So started to just take inventory and build off of that and determine how to prevent that from happening in the future.
I love that because it's the lessons that you're taking in the first response is that it's a blessing because of the people that you can serve, because of the people you can help, so they don't have to endure the mistakes and the experiences that you had to suffer. Because like you said, and obviously I'll reintroduce the fact that you're this crazy ultra runner, multiple 100-mile efforts in pretty insane times, a content creator, a soon-to-be father. Do you believe in balance?
I do. I definitely do. I wouldn't necessarily call it like a work-life balance, because what I've tried to do with my work life is have them work pretty seamlessly together. I like to build my life around the things that I'm passionate about and the things that I like, and I don't want my work to feel like work. I want it to feel like just part of what I do, part of the everyday. So when I realized I had this passion for running and for coaching and for endurance, I was like, okay, how can I build a life around that instead of having it be like one aspect of what I do or something that's like a hobby for me? How can I make it a piece of who I am and what I do every single day? And so that's kind of how I started to put the pieces together, starting to build Casually Ambitious. Now, granted, you mentioned it, I'm about to become a father here in a couple months. So that's going to smack me upside the head in a totally different way than Leadville did. And so who knows what the work-life, quote-unquote, balance is going to look like at that point. But I think that's something everybody kind of has to figure out for themselves. I'm sure it'll take some time. But like all things, you figure it out, you acclimate, and you work through it.
That's exactly it. I can attest that when my beautiful baby girl was born, there was definitely an adjustment, but I haven't missed a day of training because I was being a dad, right? Like, it just means you have to wake up a bit earlier. It just means that you got to be a little bit more creative with the training style and the way that you make time for it, right? Like I trained for my first ultra within a year after and finished it within a year after being a dad or becoming a dad. And I have full faith that this is just going to be one more accolade and a humble experience under your belt that will show you so much more than you've already experienced. So 100-mile races, something I personally have not experienced. I've met quite a few ultra runners and had the pleasure of learning about the experience. Most recently, Matt Johnson was on this podcast. He's in the process of probably finishing his run across Texas. I'm curious from your experience, when you're 50, 60, 70, 80 miles into a run and that doubt sets in, that adversity strikes your knees, that insecurity maybe starts to get the better of you, if at all. How have you managed that conversation with yourself?
It comes for all of us. I don't think it really matters how strong your mindset is. It's that doubt creeps in regardless at some point. An important part for me now that I've done it a couple times is I know that it's coming, and being able to, when it does smack you in the face, to face it head on, and you're not surprised by it anymore. You know that at some point during every single ultra, probably multiple times, you're going to be in a really dark spot, and you have to be mentally ready for battling that. The first couple times when I would face that, for me, it's always come back to having a non-negotiable end goal in sight, and that is I'm going to finish 100 miles. Like, I don't care what it's going to, unless I'm coming out on a stretcher, like, I'm finishing this race. And one thing I talk a lot about with my athletes is like, once you start negotiating with yourself, you've already lost. And we've all had these times when we're on a run. It doesn't matter if it was 100 miles or 100 minutes or 60 minutes. When you start to negotiate yourself, like, I could take this shortcut and go home a little bit faster, or maybe I can run 2 less miles today, or whatever it is, you're already setting yourself up to, basically come up a little bit short for what you did. So that especially means a lot more for these longer races. So I always come into it with like non-negotiable mindset of, I don't care how long it's going to take. As long as I am not going out on a stretcher or I don't get cut off by the time cutoffs or anything like that, I'm finishing this motherfucker.
That kind of perspective is so important because I don't know if you still go through it after establishing the standards that you have for yourself at this point. And we could talk about how you've set those standards over time. I'd actually be very interested to learn how you've set those standards for yourself. But every day, no matter how much I've done, no matter how many pull-ups, push-ups, miles, cases, clients, customers, sales, no matter what, every single day is a negotiation. And it's always that voice coming in my head, be like, today I'll do 3. No, I'm supposed to do 20. I'll just do like 10 and then 10 tomorrow. Like every single day, especially since I did the 58 miler. It's just been like, I feel proven. I don't feel complacent. I'm still training hard, but there's just this fatigue that has come along with doing something of that stature, running for 10 plus hours. It's like, God, who needs this, right? But how have you navigated that conversation? How do you handle that negotiation on a daily basis?
For me, it comes back to doing what you say you're going to do. Me and Matt Johnson talk about this a little bit too when I've had him on the pod or just whenever we connect. It's like, doing what you say you're going to do is the coolest shit you could possibly do, man. Like, being a man of your word and doing everything that you say you're going to do is a badass characteristic. It's a trait. And that's how people are going to judge you the rest of your life. Is he a person who does what he says he's going to do? And at the end of the day, when I look at the block and I see a weekend, if I'm training for an ultra and I see like a big ass weekend, it's like 16 Friday, 24 Saturday, 20 Sunday. Do I want to do that? No, but it's also like, hey, I've committed to this goal on the other side of it. I've committed to this training block that my coach prepared for myself or I prepared for myself. And I'm going to get it done because that's what I committed to. And I'm a person who says, who does what they say they're going to do. So for me, it's kind of reframing it. It's almost like tricking my mind a little bit to be like, you know, you're the guy who does what he says he's going to do. That's just innately who you are. That's a part of your being. And that's what makes you great. And I think if you want to achieve some of these things, like you have to, I'm not cocky, but I believe that I have greatness in me, you know, and I think all of us have greatness in us. And I don't think there's anything wrong with admitting that or saying like, I'm chasing this greatness inside me, because I think we all have flashes of it here and there, you know, whether it's running, trail running, or whether it's like freaking marketing or like writing a book or whatever the heck it is. Like there's flashes of greatness in all of us. And if you commit to the process and you follow through, it's when it starts to come out a little bit more. So that's kind of long-winded, but that's kind of how I think about it.
That's exactly what it's been in my experience. Keeping my word to myself, following through on the things that I said I was going to do, that's what builds confidence. I'm an attorney by trade, so it's all about evidence, right? Evidence that you give to yourself, a long, long trail of evidence that you got no choice but to believe it, even to the point where it's so objective that not even you can question it, right? Like that's how I've really tried to approach everything. What are such objective metrics that I could achieve that not even I can question? That creates a certain level of sanity and humility at the same time, because these days we see people do incredible feats, especially with running, right? Like running across the country or a state or 1,000+ miles in a certain amount of time, or multiple 100-milers like yourself, and recovering from those experiences, right? The David Goggins mentality. It's all different frames of mind that I personally relate to and that have been a catalyst for my personal and professional growth. But at the same time, it can be very unrelatable for people because they can't even find it within themselves to run a 5K. How do you connect with someone who can't relate if they have an aspiration of running a marathon but haven't even run that first mile?
Man, that's a great question. And I have to shout out Ned Brockman too, who is just one of those people that you referred to. He just did 1,000 miles and was going for 10 days, ended up at 12 days. Just fucking phenomenal feat, man. But like seeing people do shit like that opens your eyes to what is truly possible. Like we think we have these limitations and they're self-imposed. Like we hear it all the time, but it's so true, especially when you see people breaking boundaries. Like Matt right now running across fucking Texas, running 50 miles a day, or a more extreme Ned Brockman running 1,000 miles in 12 days. Like you watch the videos of him and how beat up he is and how he's just barely limping across the track. And how can you not get inspired by that? By seeing what the human body and the human mind can actually push through and do. So I think that's one aspect of it, is knowing that the boundaries are self-imposed. The other thing is just stacking bricks. Like it's not going to happen overnight. And that's what I preach to my athletes all the time, is like, we're just going to stack bricks. I don't expect you to go out there every single week and hit every single pace and every single mile that I set for you. But I do expect the effort to be there. I expect you to try. I expect you to go out there, do what you said you were going to do, which is run these miles and commit to this process and go out there and do it. And even if you don't hit, guess what? You laid a big brick down for a foundation for what's to come. And then maybe the next week you are able to hit that and then some. And so the confidence builds along with the fitness. They go hand in hand, and the mindset. It's kind of a 3-piece thing there, and they grow together. So that's kind of the two-way street that I look at it, is both of those things.
I'm glad you brought up Ned, because there's this article that came out recently, I don't know if you saw it, about how mental toughness is toxic masculinity rebranded.
No, I didn't. But I'm not surprised.
What's your take just hearing that? You can imagine that the article reflects the title at a high level. I won't hold it against you for not having read the article. The audience won't either. What's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear something like that?
I think it's just folks have different perspectives on things, man. Like people are going to forever rip apart David Goggins for doing the things that he's done and preaching the way he kind of preaches, which is just a no bullshit, like get it done mentality at all costs. And look at all the good that David Goggins has done for people in our country, and like myself included. But like, man, I would say like, I don't know, half of the people that I know in endurance running and racing have gotten to that point inspired by David Goggins in some capacity. I mean, it's just game changing what this guy has been able to do as far as his influence across the way. So I would say the same thing for stuff like Ned Brockman and for this thing like toxic masculinity is like, it's not for everybody, and not everybody is going to get inspired or motivated by it. But some of us, you know, like me and you, it fires us the fuck up and it makes us want to get after it. So it's not everybody's cup of tea, and it's never going to be. And people have the right to their own opinion and the right to say and write whatever they want to write. Just know that like, if it resonates with you, that's fine. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about that. As long as it's hitting home for you and motivating you, that's what matters.
I think it's so important to highlight that. Obviously, I said the same thing when I reacted to it. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but I think perspective really matters, and the framing of it really matters, because people see some of the stuff you've done or that I've done. I have a background in strength endurance also, did 1,000+ pull-ups and push-ups and raised tens of thousands of dollars. They see that and they look at it as some kind of self-aggrandizing kind of action instead of getting inspired. They get intimidated instead of jacked up about it. When you talk about Goggins or you talk about any of these other influences, specifically within running, I'm a competitive person, but I was inspired seeing Ned run and limp across the line. Same with Matt, same with you. I am like can't wait for your revenge tour on Leadville, you know? Same as I was with Dan Churchill. When I got the chance to interview him after he DNF'd Leadville the first time, I was so hyped about his belt buckle the second time around. And then when I saw him a couple weeks ago, I was like, bro, you did it. Like you said you would, and you did it. You kept the word. And your revenge tour is going to be like some record-breaking kind of experience, I imagine. But it's like those are the kinds of feats that should inspire and make people want to do things rather than, you know, play it off to, well, they're just hyping themselves up because they want to show their alpha male dominance. And I think that does a disservice to the effort and the sacrifice and the pain and the like negative self-talk that seeps in and all of these different things that prevent you from doing a thing with ease, right? Like it's so hard. I know 40 miles into a 50-mile run, my knees were crushing me, and my mom's telling me I could stop anytime. My wife is asking me if I'm okay, and I'm just like, I can't afford to doubt myself right now. I have to finish this thing. I know I'll finish this thing one step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time. Now that you've gone through this experience, what's the mission? How do you plan on bouncing back and taking this next challenge head on?
I definitely am hungry. I'm excited to get back out there. I also want to do it on my own terms. I don't want to do it because that's what people want me to do or that's what I'm supposed to do. I want to do it because that's what I want to fucking do. And I'm like hungry for it in my own terms, in my own time. So maybe, you know, I'm going to get my Leadville redemption. I have no doubt about that. It might not be next year. It might be in 2 years or it might be in 3 years. I certainly want to keep running hundreds. I already got the bug again to like run a fast marathon again and do some of these things. But I just want to make sure that I'm doing it for the right reasons and on my own terms and not feel external pressures as like, you know, you're a running personality, so you got to be running, have a race every 3 months or whatever it is. I went through a little bit of that last year and realized like that's a surefire way to burn out and to not love the sport, you know, as much as I did when I first came into it. And ultimately, I started to document my journey and everything because I love the sport. I love the process, and I wanted to share what I learned and picked up. And, you know, the things that I was going through, I wanted to share that with other people, and hopefully they resonated with it. And some of them did, fortunately enough. And that's why I continue that. So early in the spring, I committed to too much too soon, and where it was like 3 races back to back to back. And I really learned my lesson as far as putting too much on the calendar, because you start to do it for maybe the wrong reasons at that point. So I want to, have my 1 or 2 big races a year, have a couple fun runs in between, and really just embrace the process and embrace the journey and make sure I never lose that love for running, because that's what it really all comes back to, of like why I've done this. And also, I didn't really touch on this before, but like the reason I wanted to become a coach and train other people in the first place is because I had someone do it for me who changed the trajectory of my life. Like my first 100-mile race, I hired my coach, Casey. I talk about her on every single podcast because I don't even think she knows how influential she's been on my life. But like I hired her, worked with her for 8-9 months leading into my first 100. I went from somebody who thought this was going to be impossible to achieve to somebody who I almost won the race. I came in second and like had third fastest course time and course record. And like that was from her showing me what I was capable of. That was her pulling that out of me. And I was a different person on the other side of 100 miles. And I was like, man, I want to do this for other people, because I saw the power of what it just did for me. It lit a fire under me like I've never had lit before. And it all just comes back to like this burning passion and desire for like loving the sport, but also to like help people continue to love it too. And I don't want to drive people to do some of the things that I've done, like race back to back to back to back again for the wrong reasons. We should be going out there and setting these benchmarks and trying to PR, but you're not going to PR every fucking race. And you don't want to beat yourself in the ground running 100-mile weeks just because it's cool to run 100-mile weeks. So like setting expectations for what's realistic and what's possible and what's going to be the best long-term thing for you too. I mean, we as runners, man, we've got to think longer term, because you really can do some damage. You can get rhabdo like I did, or like, overtraining is a real thing. So just being conscious of those things and making sure that we're doing the training and the running and all this for the right reasons.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Overtraining is such a funny concept because there's, especially in the last 5-6 years, I would say, this massive movement around recovery. And it's definitely enlightened me, the importance of it. I focus heavily on mobility. I cold plunged for a couple of years, was doing cold showers, but in my experience, I just found that after I would train, and I'm someone who trains early in the morning, I would take a cold shower and like my nervous system would just be heightened. So if like my wife, girlfriend at the time, or something for work was calling to me, I was more irritable after the cold shower, even if I took the cold shower. I was just like, yeah, what do you need, right? I'm fired up, as opposed to like, how can I help, right? Especially after training, right? And I just also really missed hot showers. And so now I'm kind of on this trajectory of I really lean into the sauna, and mobility keeps me focused. So my recovery protocol isn't as, I eat pretty clean for the most part. You kind of got to pick and choose your spots with it, right? How has recovery played a role in your career as you've trained for these hundreds and now as you've recovered from rhabdo?
It's huge. It's a huge part. And I'm so glad that you're talking about the cold shower thing too, because I'm currently in my cold shower season. I'm doing this thing with my group called Forge 50, where we're kind of doing a 50-day jumpstart, restart, whatever you want to call it, where we commit to 10 daily routine items that we have to do. It's kind of like think 75 hard, but with more mindfulness. So it's like work out for 45 minutes a day, 1 minute cold shower at the end of your shower, no alcohol, wake up at 5 a.m., in bed by 10 p.m., all these things. There's 10 of them, 10 tenets basically. So I'm in my cold shower era, and I'm quite the opposite. I find like I get the energy from it, and I don't have the irritability that it sounds like you kind of have experience from it. I'll find I'll be more irritable if I don't do it. But that's the beautiful thing about some of these practices, is like they're not universal, meaning like you got to pick and choose what works for you and what doesn't. So like the guru can tell you that Wim Hof can say, hey, this breathing technique is going to do this for you all day long. But until you practice it and you realize like, hey, that was amazing, I want to do this every single day. Or like, I didn't really feel anything. It didn't do anything for me. Then discard it. It's like, you don't have to do these things just because it's like, you know, the trendy thing to do. It's like, find out what these things are, practice them, and take what you want and leave what you don't. And so for me, that's been the process. And right now, like I said, I'm in my cold shower season. I'm enjoying it. And it's only 1 minute cold shower. It's not like a full one. It's just like hot to cold at the end for a minute, which isn't that tough. And then I'm doing like my breath work. As far as when I'm prepping for 100 or something like that, I love to go do at my local wellness clinic. They have this thing called the squeeze and freeze. So you'll put on the compression boots and then you'll go into cryo chamber right after that. I love that. I don't know the science behind it, but it just juices me up and it makes me feel great, and it really helps my recovery. So I think it's huge. I also will admit, and like I just said, like, I think I overtrained thoroughly during my Leadville 100 build-up experience, and no amount of active recovery can offset like heavy, intense overtraining. I will say that through my experience. And these are things that are like not necessarily scientifically proven. Like, people will argue with me all day and say, hey, overtraining's not real. Like, you didn't overtrain because that's not a real thing. I disagree. Because I felt it. Going up the stairs at the end of the night, and you can probably speak to this, of like, you have this like deep ache in your legs. You're like, oh man, this is just different. This is just different kind of fatigue, pain that I'm feeling right now. And I felt that for like 3 months straight. And I'm like, yeah, this ain't normal. This ain't right. But I just have to, I'll rest on the other side of Leadville. Let me get through Leadville and then I'll rest. And then, so we all know what happened at Leadville. So all that to say is like, you know, you really got to listen to your body and take the ones that really affect you and that you feel benefit you the most, and lean into those. And maybe it's something simple like a dynamic stretching routine at the end of the day for 10, 15 minutes, or maybe it's a breath work or whatever it is, but just experiment and find those things and then kind of dial them in as you go.
Yeah, let's talk about it for a bit more, because I think I hear both sides, right? And I actually lean more towards yours. And I saw Truett Haynes post recently, like, about, and I'm a big Truett Haynes fan. Shout out for breaking the pull-up record. Hope you break it again, bro. You just smile. If you feel sore, if you feel tired, like, just smile, tell yourself you're feeling okay, keep going. And I've had that mentality. I'm in that season now. And I've been in that season in the past. And so after I did the 1,018 pull-ups, it took about 4 hours. I felt like my elbows were going to fall off. So I took time off from doing pull-ups. I think I even took a couple days off just because my body had really felt run down. I wasn't fueling like at all. I fasted for like the first 500 reps, to be honest, and then like started fueling, and eventually we finished it. It wasn't pretty, but we finished it. A week later, like throughout the week, I'd kind of felt my body going and getting a bit more run down, specifically my immune system. And so me not really, I was also reading Goggins' second book at the time, never finished, which wasn't helping anything at all, just like really deep in the rabbit hole. I do 1,000 push-ups for the second time in my life. This was just like, I didn't tell anyone, I never posted about it, I just like did the 1,000. And the next day or two, like completely run down, my body like just shut down on me. And this is like, I'm someone who trains every day, multiple marathons. I think you get the picture. Like, my body just completely shut down, and I had to take 2 weeks off. I just was like, all right, minimum 2 weeks, like no training whatsoever. I would do mobility and stuff, but I was simply like waking up, going to the office, like coming home, watching TV. Like, I never fell down. Like, I still ate clean. Like, I never fell down the rabbit hole. I didn't pick alcohol back up, none of that. But it was just one of those, like, I missed training. But the first time I got back in the gym after those couple weeks and I tried to do a squat, like, my whole lower body felt it. It was like, oh my God, this is what people who don't train feel like. But I think it's important, and I know I'm kind of blabbering a bit, that we talk about this because you're someone who is doing what I did, but like tenfold. And like at an extremely high level, setting like on pace to set course records. I don't want to misspeak, and really operating at an extremely high level. This topic is important because people lose sight of relativity, right? So you've talked a bit about some of the learnings and some of the people that you hope to help from it, but maybe you could just share a bit more of your experience around overtraining, what it looks like, and some of the things that you're going to change moving forward. So this way people don't have to make those same mistakes that we have.
Absolutely. It goes back to stacking the schedule a little bit too aggressively. So I'll give you guys some context a little bit. So my spring had a big spring. In March, I did a 50-mile race. In April, I ran the Boston Marathon. And in May, I did a 100-mile race. And I wanted to do these back to back to back just to prove to myself that I could do these different distances. And still, like, I wanted to compete at a high level at all of them, and like had goals that I wanted to achieve for these. And it was naive for me to think I was going to be able to PR and like go out and just rip all these races. So the first one goes great, 50-miler. I won the 50-miler, and that was solid. Second one, Boston. I had a really tough day in Boston, and Boston was supposed to be my A race, but when you put a 50-mile race right in the middle of your block, your marathon block, it fucks you up a little bit. And so didn't have the perfect build into that. My fitness wasn't where it was supposed to be for the hills in Boston. The heat got to me that day. Not making any excuses, my fitness just wasn't there that day in Boston. So didn't have a good Boston. And then I had the 100-miler 3 weeks later after that. And I knew I was pretty fatigued at this time, but I'm like, hey, again, similar to like the Leadville mentality, is like, you'll rest on the other side. You'll rest on the other side. Run that 100, came in 7th in that one. Decent effort. I wanted to do better than that, but the field was really, really strong. This is the Hellbender 100. It was in May. And very challenging course. It's like 48,000 elevation up and down. So a lot of elevation. So it was challenged. And then, on the backside of that, I should have just taken some time off and rested. And I took 1 week off, and then I started training for Leadville. And so really there was a period of like 7 to 8 months where I didn't do anything but really train. And like, yes, there was deloads where I would take some time off, but they were 1 week deloads. And then I'd go right back into the build, as you guys who've marathon prepped or ultra prepped know how it goes. I think the stacked fatigue from the first 3 months combined with going right into a 3-month build for Leadville was just too much for my body. Like on paper, I had a perfect build for Leadville. I had 300-mile weeks. Every weekend I was going to the mountains, getting big vert, doing what I was supposed to do. If I wasn't in the mountains, then I was on the Stairmaster, the stair climber. If I wasn't there, I was doing incline tread or running hills here in Charlotte or whatever I was doing. I also at this time was trying to get down to my racing weight, my ideal racing weight, which I thought was going to be about 172. I was trying to lighten up a little bit. And that was a mistake, because to do the volume of training that I was doing while also being in a deficit, just a recipe for disaster. It was a recipe for disaster. And so all that to say, my biggest takeaway was like, always just fuel for performance. Do not fuel for aesthetic. Do not fuel to reach a racing weight. Your body's going to naturally fluctuate to where it wants to go for a racing weight during your prep. During your, if you're marathon training, you're going to go to the track once, twice a week, whatever. Don't worry about your weight, because it's going to naturally flow where you perform best at. And right about the time where it's time for a taper is going to be your peak ideal weight anyway to go run what you want to run. So maybe you put on 2-3 pounds, 4 pounds before the actual marathon happens, but that's natural. You're supposed to get to the marathon line nice and carved up, a little bit fluffy, right? So you can push a little bit harder for the next, 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever it is. So my biggest takeaway is just always fuel for performance. And then on the backside of an event, take the time you need to properly recover. And I just don't mean like mentally recover, because we can be mentally good in a week and be like, all right, I got the post-race blues. Let me sign up for something else and jump right back into it. I mean, mentally and physically, make sure your body is back to baseline, whatever baseline is. That could be, 3 weeks. That could be 6 weeks, could be 8 weeks, 2 months, whatever it is. And I'm not saying just take the time off. I'm just saying, like, lower the volume, dude. For me, I went right back into 70, 80-mile weeks right after that. So it's like, just tone it down. You can run 20-mile a week, a 30-mile week for a couple weeks and recover, find that baseline, and get back to kind of feeling like yourself again, which I didn't allow myself to do.
Powerful lessons. I do my best on a daily basis to try and follow everything that you shared. I mean, we talked about the cold showers. I mean, and honestly, and candidly, I'm very appreciative that you're putting yourself on blast in this way, sharing what didn't go well, because it's so important for people to understand. And they'll conflate these two things right here. I was speaking with who I believe to be the best sports attorney of all time, represented Tiger Woods, represented Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, NCAA players. He's the leading authority on, or pardon me, he was the leading advocate that helped bring name, image, and likeness rights and royalties to NCAA college athletes. His name is Jeffrey Kessler. He's the most recent release of the podcast. And I asked him about people conflating focus with stepping outside of their comfort zone. And so when you accomplish as much as you have in a specific arena, I don't know if you get this, but I definitely got it. Do people tell you maybe it's time to try something new, like an Ironman or something along those, or like rowing, or just something that'll test you in a different way and tell you like, hey, it's time to step outside the comfort zone, versus focus, meaning like, this is my thing, this is what I'm doing, and I want to excel at this, and dedication, commitments required. How do you kind of rationalize those two? Because then I got to follow up.
It's an interesting question because I'm at a bit of a crossroads with this myself right now. I obviously love running. It's my passion, and whatever I continue to do, it's going to be involved in some capacity, whether that is high rocks, whether that is triathlon or something along those lines. I'm looking at maybe a half Ironman to a full Ironman maybe later next year. It's not necessarily the fact of like, it's not the marathon, or it's not the ultra marathon, or it's not the Ironman. It's just the challenge, man. I mean, I'm just a competitor. I just like to go out there and challenge myself. And again, you know, when I first signed up for the 100, did I ever think like, you're going to fall in love with this to the point where you're going to become a running coach? Like, no, absolutely not. But that's just how the cards fell. And so for me, I just want to continue to lean into the things that light me up, that give me that passion and that fire. So I certainly can understand and I do resonate with wanting to kind of zone in and really focus. And that's kind of how I have been with ultra running the last year. But I've also realized it's not necessarily the 100-mile race, or again, like the marathon. It's more the challenges. And I want to be flexible, and I want to be able to do what I want to do competitively and not put myself in a box, quote unquote, with being an ultra runner.
I'm so with you on the challenge. For me, I definitely relate to that, because when people were telling me step outside my comfort zone, do something a little bit different, I'm like, well, I still got some stuff I want to accomplish here. For me, fitness at a high level, and I'm wondering what it's like for you. I mean, I'm more a corporate professional, and so it's not full time and doesn't compensate me in any way besides intrinsic motivation, right? There's this frictionless element where I got a home gym and I just have to go outside to run. So it saves me a ton of time in terms of maintaining my health and wellness, just to do the quote unquote bare minimum. Focus relentlessly on the fundamentals, calisthenics, distance, speed, try to get better in some way, shape, or form. And so like the idea of training for a new challenge like an Ironman, of course it's scary. Running is scary. Ultra marathons are scary. It's all scary to some degree. But the idea of how you said it about, it's really just about the challenge. What's my appetite for pushing myself in this particular arena at this particular season of life? You talked about the cold showers, your community now, your community for casually ambitious. Why don't you tell us a bit about that?
The beautiful thing about Casually Ambitious and putting that together over the last year or so has been just the different walks of life and the different variety of folks who have come in and become athletes in the program. There's people who are training for their first 5K. And we just had a guy this past weekend complete Moab 240. So he ran 240 miles. So there's like this total opposite ends of the spectrum, but we all have the same thing in common, which is we're trying to become a better version of ourselves. And we can walk through, and share our journeys in the group and kind of resonate with each other in that capacity, regardless of what the end task is. So creating that community has been huge. I mean, I just wanted to originally create a coaching program that was comprehensive. Usually you'll get a run coach and a running program, or you'll get a strength coach and a strength program, or a nutrition coach and a nutrition program. What I wanted to do was, hey, I love this hybrid lifestyle. I like to sling some weight and I like to run far and run fast. So let me make something that's more conducive to all of that and more comprehensive. So that's the idea behind Casually Ambitious. And then the byproduct of that is this incredible community of human beings that also have the same passion, because oftentimes with endurance training, we're out there getting the miles, but we're lone wolves. Like we go and do the solo miles, or we're getting the bike for, 4 or 5 hour long ride or long run or whatever it is. And then you come back to your spouse and your spouse is like, how was it? And you're like, it sucked. And that's pretty much it. Right. But like with a group or a community, you're able to say like, man, I hit my splits today. It was amazing. Or like, dude, I had such a tough day. I really got my lunch ate out there. It really sucked. Or I tried these new shoes. They really, I had the carbons on today. It was phenomenal, or it sucked, or whatever it is. Just to have that community and that format, that open dialogue to be able to talk through these things is invaluable, man, because you're no longer that lone wolf. You're on this journey with other people who are going through similar circumstances. So that's really been the most beautiful part about creating this coaching program, is like the many walks of life and different, goals and all these things set forth by the individuals in the group.
It's pretty cool, because one of the biggest lessons that I've learned this year has been about community. And I haven't stopped talking about it. The power of surrounding yourself with like-minded people is like a supercharger. It's access to information. It's being in an environment of like-minded people that share those same passions and pursuits. And you did such a good job of articulating it, where you could tell your partner or your spouse or whoever, like, hey, I had a tough run, and, they want to care. They're like, oh God, but like, that's tough. But like, life is still a thing.
They have a tough time resonating with it, for sure.
And I think you did a great job of articulating how surrounding yourself with people, and I abided by the lone wolf mentality to a fault. And now I'm definitely on the opposite side, where I see the value in surrounding myself with people and creating a community. Obviously, the audience and fans and friends of Inside the Inspired, I'm eternally grateful for. They get to learn, and I get to learn from people like yourself who put themselves in the hot seat to share their experience, their wins, their failures. You spend all of probably 30 to 60 seconds talking about all the different ultras and marathons and PRs that you've had, and tens of minutes talking about the failures and the experiences that you extracted from them. And that says more about your character, in my opinion. There's a question that I pose to all my guests that I'd now like to pose to you. If the future version of yourself from 10 years from now were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think he would say to you?
I don't think about this exact scenario, but I think about something similar to this a lot. And I would say one word, it would be just patience. It would be patience, because I know I'm on the right path, because I'm fired up about it every single day. I'm trying my best to surround myself with the people that are like-minded and also have similar mentalities and fire me up to be better as well. And the tough part about building community and like content and all these things, as you very well know, is just, it's a grind. It's a slow grind. And as long as you're putting value into the world, that's all you can do. And, it's going to start to snowball, and it's going to build, and it's going to continue to grow, but it just takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. There's these outliers that do pop off overnight that go viral or whatever. And good for them. That's awesome. That's really awesome for them. But the ones that typically stand the test of time and are around for years and years and years are the ones that grew sustainably and gradually for the right reasons and organically for the right reasons over that period of time. So I try to remember that because, you know, I want the growth and I want things to pop off. But like, I prayed for this scenario 2 years ago and now I get to live it, right? And I try to remember that too. So the 10-year version of me would probably say the same thing, is like, you're going to get there. It's just going to take a little bit longer than you thought it was going to take.
Chase, this has been awesome. I got one more question for you that I'm going to move into a different part of the episode that I meant to ask you earlier. I mean, you've run multiple ultra marathons. You train at a very high level. Mental toughness, mental resilience plays a role in that type of high performance. How do you define mental toughness?
Mental toughness to me is seeing the barrier, seeing the, you know, whatever it is that's in your way, being scared, being beat down by it, and continuing to push through regardless of circumstances, and knowing like on the other side of this thing is the version of myself that I know I can be, and that I want to be moving forward. And like, when I think about mental toughness, I think about mostly ultras, and I think about those dark patches, kind of what we talked about earlier. And now for me, knowing that that's just part of ultra running, I know they're coming. So it's preparing myself to go through these dark times. And I do that with tools. And like anything in life, you can use tools and create tools and put them in your tool belt so that you can work through these things. So for ultras, for example, I am a big believer of positive self-talk. You know, I think I've heard the saying that your mind and your tongue are your rudder. Whatever you think and whatever you say is where you're going to go. Huge believer in that. I like to go into races knowing that. And so I'll create a mantra. And whether I pick that up during the race, maybe it's something like, you know, it just comes to me in the middle of the race, or something I think about beforehand when I'm like running my last couple miles in peak week and visualizing the race come to life. I'll make sure I have a mantra in the back of my mind that I can go to when times get hard, or just a mindset and a positive self-talk that I know I'm going to go to when those times get hard. So probably didn't do a great job answering that question, but I certainly face a lot of you know, the difficulties and the dark patches, and that's how I typically like to work through them. So I rambled there, but hopefully you get the point.
You did a great job answering the question. It was a powerful sentiment, one that'll absolutely resonate. Please let the audience know where they can keep up with your journey.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me on. This was a wonderful conversation. You can follow me at Chase Price on Instagram, is where I'm most active. And if you're interested in Casually Ambitious or any of that, that's at Casually Ambitious on Instagram as well, or casuallyambitious.com.
Appreciate you, man. Until the next one.